Hello and welcome everyone to the last session, to the last insight session of the Upstream Ahead Summit. We are going to talk about the energy transition and clean energy alternatives in this summit today. To begin this session, may I call upon the chairperson for the session, Shri Rakesh Agiwal. He is a CA, CS, and CWA with over 25 years of progressive experience in finance and operations management, international expansions, driving profitability, cost control measures, regulatory compliance, and overall financial stability within startups and global multi-billion-dollar organizations. Working with Cairn Oil Gas since last 16 years and closely associated with the Rajasthan project since inception. He is currently designated as Chief Policy and Regulatory Officer. May I welcome you, sir? I would also like to welcome the esteemed panelists today, Shri Rajnath Ram. Shri Rajnath Ram is currently the advisor energy at NITI Aayog, Government of India. He has been working on government policy and program formulation related to oil and natural gas, renewable energy, power, and coal. He is also leading the initiative of energy data management to create a robust energy data management system of international repute and is in charge of the initiative to set up an energy modeling unit within the NITI Aayog. We welcome you, sir. I would also like to welcome Shri Seethapathy Chander. Mr. Seethapathy Chander has over 42 years of professional experience covering engineering and financial studies, detailed engineering, site construction, testing, and commissioning, corporate governance, acquisitions and mergers, international infrastructure investments, memberships, research and development, investing in and managing trust funds, environmental policy and management, IT and telecommunications, and incubating startups in India and overseas. We welcome you, sir. I would also like to welcome Dr. P.C. Maithani. Dr. P.C. Maithani is currently working as a director in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. During his professional career, he has worked on different aspects of renewable energy programs and policies. We welcome you, sir. I would also like to welcome Mr. Jarand Rystad. Jarand founded Rystad Energy in 2004 and is managing the company. He has extensive experience in oil and gas strategy, advisory work from McKinsey and Rystad Energy. He has led a number of strategy projects for international oil and gas companies and oilfield service companies. He has also worked with governments and international organizations on topics related to the global energy agenda, and he is advising investors and deal screening, transactions, and portfolio management. We welcome you, sir. I would also like to welcome the session co-chair today, Shri Gaurav Moda, Oil and Gas Consulting Lead at EY, Energy Industry Lead for the India business aligned to resources and strategy and management consulting. He has extensive strategy consulting experience, which is spread across US, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and India. His areas of expertise include growth strategy, diversification, organization, restructuring, sales and marketing, profit improvement. We welcome you, sir. May I now request the session co-chair, Sir Gaurav Moda, to commence the session, please. Sir, the stage is all yours.
Yeah, Chandrima, I will start the session and then Gaurav will take it over.
Yes.
All right, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. So, respected audience of the Upstream Ahead Virtual Summit, we welcome you again to the most interesting subject on future energy. Just to set the context, India's per capita consumption is much lower than the global average. Over the past decade, India has witnessed steep increase in the energy demand on the back of a strong economic growth. As per the IEA, India's total fuel consumption increased by almost 50% in the last 10 years, which is almost 5% per annum, which has also resulted in the total primary energy demand from fossil fuels, primarily coal and oil. Well, India imports about more than 80% of its oil demand and 25% of its coal demand. Therefore, in the near term, India faces the daunting task of meeting its fast-growing energy demand while reducing its carbon emissions and ensuring energy security for the future. In its transition towards a more reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy mix, India aims to reduce the emission intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030 from the 2005 levels and achieve 40% of its cumulative electric power from non-fossil fuel-based energy resources, mainly renewable power. Further, India has also set targets of achieving 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022 and then increasing it to 450 gigawatt by 2030. In this backdrop, energy transition and clean energy alternatives has become a very important topic. Let us hear from our esteemed speakers, and I will request Shri Gaurav Moda from Ernst & Young, who have extensive knowledge and exposure on the energy transition and clean energy alternatives, to take the session further. Thank you.
Thank you, Rakesh. A very good evening to everyone, and thank you for taking time out for this conversation. What we will do is we have our esteemed speaker set who will talk about the topic one by one, and I will provide conclusions of the session shortly thereafter. So to start with, Mr. Seethapathy Chander, may I request you to take the first view? Sorry, could you please go on unmute? We could not hear you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Moda, and thank you, Mr. Agiwal. On behalf of World Energy Council India, as well as myself, I thank you for inviting me to speak today. I would like to speak very briefly on the context of today's session. I will skip through the first, or just skim through the first few slides. I have only 6 slides given the time available. I'll skim through the first few and then concentrate on the last 2, which is supposed to be the so-called meat of the session. So may I request that the slides be put on? Okay. Next slide, please. When we talk about energy transition, what we actually mean is transition. It's a phased changeover, and speed is determined by choice and available technologies. People expect that the moment we announce something new, everybody should cut into that new topic wholesale and forget about the past. In energy, it doesn't happen. You have to make long-term investments. Investments have to be, amounts have to be recovered and serviced. And therefore, this is something that we should keep in mind. Secondly, when we talk about energy supplies, we need to balance between what the World Energy Council calls the trilemma of energy access, energy security, energy sustainability. I'm not going to dwell on the subject because I suppose everybody knows about this. Next slide, please. Okay, now when it comes to transition, we have to discuss choice options. Now, the first option is, of course, optimized usage, because we know that everybody requires energy for various kinds of work. So the first topic, is how do we increase or optimize the usage of energy? There, the subjects of energy efficiency, that's number one. And then, of course, we start reducing energy requirements by choosing economic activities. And of course, the last subject is population control, which nobody likes to speak about, but it is a denominator or a determinant of energy consumption. Now, choice of economic activity, earlier said, please. Choice of economic activities, of course, it depends on what you choose to do. If it is, for example, agriculture, as I said, different kinds of energies are required, energy sources. If it's industry and what kind of industry, it will also determine how much energy we consume and so on. Population control, I will not dwell. I think everybody knows about this. The second choice option we have is substitution of sources to go into lower emissions. coal to liquid fuels to gas, coal to nuclear, and hydrocarbons to renewable energy resources. Next slide, please. On renewable energy resources, we have, these are the common sources we speak about. Hydroelectricity, I will not speak about that because I suppose everybody knows it. Solar in India, we have had ground mounted and grid connected as well as rooftop mounted. We have been successful in ground mounted grid connected. We have not been successful in spreading rooftop simply because of our tariff system, where the supply or tariff to residences are subsidized and therefore cheap, and therefore the competitive offset costs are low, not giving us enough incentive to go in for rooftop solar. Now, to counter this, the government has subsidized rooftop solar as well. So we have a funny situation where one government subsidy is actually competing with another government subsidy. We need to do something about this, but it's there. Okay. On wind, we have two types, onshore, offshore. India has done very well on onshore. It's not done well at all on offshore. I'm happy to see in the last budget of the finance minister some degree of support for offshore. We'll discuss this in the next slide. The last part is green hydrogen. I think this is something very exciting and this is happening. Costs are still very high, but I think there is, with concerted efforts, these costs can come down. And in a country like India, where it's very diverse, there are opportunities, if not on mainstream, at least niche opportunities for green hydrogen. Next slide, please. On wind energy, our onshore is, as I mentioned, is well developed. We have done quite well on this. Further cost optimization is possible. Unfortunately, we did better on solar, and therefore, since the solar tariff prices have come down dramatically, everybody has forgotten about the fact that we did very well in wind initially. So it's a question of working further on onshore wind and making sure that we can extract or optimize the costs further. On offshore, there's hardly been any development in India because, again, of the competitive cost factors associated with solar. Our solar tariff is around now hovering around 2 rupees per kilowatt hour. And given that offshore is about 9 rupees to 10 rupees, it's deemed as non-competitive. And therefore, there has been no development. However, I must say that there is great potential, especially in peninsular India, where there are no other energy resources for wind. And this also gives us a lot of opportunities for hybridization opportunities with solar. Instead of just adding batteries, if we have hybrid solar and wind, offshore wind typically reaches its peak during the twilight hours, morning and evening, and solar takes the afternoon peak. So it's a good combination, and studies have shown it actually reduces the amount of storage that we need to put in combination or in tandem. So this is something that definitely we should take up, and it requires government support. People forget that when we started solar, we were looking at 15 rupees per kilowatt hour. And even today, there are some long-term PPAs at 11 rupees per kilowatt hour. So to say that we will not support projects which today cost 9 to 10 rupees, I think is not looking at a future potential for one of the main energy resources that we have. Next slide, please. Green hydrogen, my last topic for today. We have plenty of opportunities in India, both as a blend fuel with diesel, but that's limited scope, and as a primary fuel using fuel cells. There are parts of India where we have to truck our hydrocarbons to over very long distances, where there is a potential for generating green hydrogen on the spot. Now, for example, if you take an area like Ladakh, the fuel for Ladakh comes from Panipat, which is about something like 800 kilometers away. But we have the potential for developing solar energy on site, using the waters on site for producing green hydrogen, and therefore using this as a major transport and to offset diesel-fired electricity generation. We have need for extensive research, and I'm happy again that this year's budget has shown some inklings about that. We have to improve efficiency in the hydrogen production processes. Right now, there's not much research that has gone on in India regarding this. We have to also examine whether we can combine hydrogen production with other processes, industrial processes that we need. For example, near the sea coast, there are many areas where we have water desalination requirements, and to see whether we can do something in combination. And finally, we have to improve our research work on transport vehicles and package generators. This is something that is critical, especially if we are going to use that at varying heights and the temperatures that we have, both extreme heat and parts of the country where temperatures go beyond 42 to 40, 50 degrees, and extreme cold in areas like Ladakh where the temperature drops to minus 25 degrees Celsius in winter. Similarly, altitude does make a difference on fuel cells. We have to optimize for the compressors for feeding the oxygen to the fuel cell. So that is something that we have to do research on. I am happy to inform that the World Energy Council is in talk with a number of other agencies for pilot studies in Ladakh using green hydrogen. I can't share more details because there is still a lot of talk going on and some things are not firmed up. But we hope that in the next month or so, some major announcements will be made in this regard. Thank you very much. I'll stop there. Mr. Moda, back to you. Hello.
Seems that we lost him.
Yeah, I think Mr. Moda has been disconnected. I request Mr. Agiwal to please continue the session.
Who is the next one? And is it me or is it someone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chander.
Okay, Agiwal.
One second. So I would now request Mr. Rajnath Ram. Mr. Rajnath Ram can go next.
Yeah, good evening to all the distinguished panelists, and also thanked to the organizers for inviting me for this particular session. So may I request to put my slide on sharing mode? If someone can share my slides, please.
Just a moment, sir. Just a
Thank you very much. So I will be basically covering the clean energy transition aspect with respect to the policy perspective. Our government has taken several initiatives and several policy programs have been launched, and that has resulted into some impact on the clean energy transition already happening. And can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is a well-known fact that we have made commitment to achieve 40% of the total installed power generation capacity 2005 levels in 2030. By all means, the launch of the several initiatives. Recently, I think there was a some agencies has ranked India as one of the leading country which is very much on track to achieve the targets under the Paris Agreement, and this is the only country which should be achieving the 2-degree climate objective. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I'll be presenting some key statistics as of now. So if we really see in the total primary energy supply mix, the share of coal is nearly 51%, natural gas about 6.5%, petroleum 26%, nuclear 1.1, hydro 1.4, renewable including biomass, so that's 14%. But as per se, the renewables only, it is just below the 2% in the total primary energy supply mix, and that we are going to increase that share, where the coal share would come down in 2035 very drastically. We have also planned to increase our natural gas share, and recently also in the budget it has been announced that 100 more city gas distribution network would be added, and the petroleum is the one aspect where the crude oil and the petroleum products, the share would likely to go down. The nuclear share, there will be a minor increase. Hydro, because of its all complexity and the various challenges associated with it may range up to 1 to 2%. But the renewable would be increasing like anything, because we have set up a target of about 175 gigawatt by 2022 and 450 by 2030. But as regards to the import dependencies is concerned, the coal might be reduced, because there have been coal diversification plan by the CIL, and the ministry is taking up several initiatives to reduce the import dependence on coal. Crude oil, the scenario would not much change, because we find very less already old fields they are depleting, so the share would still remain same as part of the import dependency is concerned. Natural gas, unless we get major finds and some major enhancement in the domestic basins where the production can be enhanced, still the scenario would remain same, and the overall energy scenario would roughly be about 26 to 31%. That is the import dependency I have calculated. Next slide, please. So what are the key focus areas to achieve the clean energy mix? So in the clean electricity mix, as of now, coal nearly contributes 72% of the power generation today. Government is scaling RE resources, and we have a plan to increase up to 450 gigawatt by 2030, and we may go beyond that. But to support these RE initiatives, we have parallelly initiated several activities. Now the solar PV manufacturing program has been also announced. Then hybrid renewable energy storage projects around the clock. I mean, that's activities already on. So, but in the overall RE mix, the solar will play a major role, because of its falling prices of the solar technology. We are also aiming to electrify the several demand sector, which is currently 18%. We are aiming to increase up to 26% through the clean energy resources. Industrial decarbonization, that should be the strategy, where some MSME sector who are using the diesel-based generation for their power backup, that needs to switch over to the more cleaner version of the electricity sources. Many companies have already declared to become a net zero emission company by 2030 or 2040. Next slide, please. Hydrogen energy mission. Everybody is well aware that in this budget also this has been announced, and that's the future of the energy. Decarbonizing the transportation sector with several initiatives like hydrogen, CNG based, compressed biogas, LNG based transportation, ethanol, methanol, and all these activities are being pursued. And the government has preponed the target of ethanol blending 20% by 2025. Then advanced chemistry cell manufacturing, just to support the transportation sector and the energy storage system. And the government has already announced the PLI scheme on that. Next slide, please. Clean coal technology. Department of Science and Technology has also announced that there would be a mission set up, and they have already announced some funding about $238 million. And they wanted to set up two centers for excellence in this particular area, and then promotion of clean coal technologies, coal gasification, coal to chemicals. That is, that's the cleaner energy transition approach that is being followed. Gas-based economy. Everybody knows that as of now, the share of gas is only 6.5% in the overall energy basket. We have to increase by 15%, but that will require a huge amount of infrastructure and a lot of investment. And obviously, the certain reforms like marketing and pricing freedom, that is itself evolving, but government took up initiative in 2019 to come out with the policy where the new fines would be covered under this marketing and pricing. And at the same time, I think ministry is also working out to make the existing price regime market friendly. Next slide, please. Clean cooking initiative, where we have to improve the access to affordable and clean cooking, but we need infrastructure strengthening, particularly with the LPG distribution to the rural areas, city gas distribution networks, and of course the electricity cooking is another area we need to pursue it in a very clear manner. Energy efficiency itself has to play a major role. We have estimated that if energy efficiency is applied across all the several sectors, it would lead to a major reduction in the demand side. So we are assuming something 13% if in the overall energy demand can be reduced by 2030. This would also lead to the energy intensity reduction, and government has already taken several initiatives, including PAT scheme, to materialize this. Next, please. Next, please. But at the same time, we have to also focus the mission-based clean energy R&D. That is very, very much required, because, and we should scale up clean tech R&D in the mission mode, spearhead grant challenge to identify the frontier digital technology, and scale up startups with a smart energy technology intervention. At the same time, because there are several new technology disruptions is happening, we should also focus on the upskilling the workforce, strengthening the skill council for imparting robust training and the capacity building exercise, and also introduce the new courses in the academic institution. That is very, very much required at this point of time. Next, please. So this is the final slide. India energy future. If you say India is committed to deliver cleaner, reliable, secure, and affordable energy to all its citizens. As India's rising energy demand will be met through more cleaner forms of energy, renewables, and alternate energy sources will play a major role in transforming the energy landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rajnath. Very, very insightful views, almost on all aspects of the energy transition. Appreciate you sharing those thoughts. Next up, may I request Mr. Rakesh, if he's there, to take the stage? I guess he's not there.
No,
Dr. P.C Maithani, may I request you to kindly take over the stage?
Yeah, good afternoon to all, rather good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me in this very pertinent session on the alternative energy and energy transition. By very specific nature, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is spearheading the clean energy transition in the country. And just by way of background, I must say that way back in 1982, a separate department was constituted in Government of India. That time it was named as Department of Non-Conventional Energy Sources, and over the period it was given a ministry's profile, and this name has also been registered in 2006 as the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, not non-conventional, because now by and large we feel that renewable has been mainstreamed in a big way. Let us look at how things are changing at very fast rate in India and globally. The share of, some of the previous speakers mentioned about that, particularly from the World Energy Congress, I really like the word trilemma, that which the world is moving, the accessibility, affordability, and convenience, all these factors. Now, India, with 17% of our population, our energy mix, either it is electricity or energy, is roughly 5% of the global. We contribute on that. Same story is repeated in the carbon space also, that we have 17% the population, but carbon wise also we are less than 5% we contribute into this, and historically our contribution is far lesser than that, and in the range of 4%. So the moral is that India is relatively, if you take globally, India is relatively using lesser energy than any other major countries, and our per capita consumption is still 1/3, and electricity is less than 1/3 of the global average. In this scenario, three major developments have taken place in the country. Number one, the increasing the share of energy and making it available to all the masses. That was the first thing which was done. And since last 6 years, virtually everybody in the country is connected to the electricity. So the access to energy has been made one of the most feasible thing which has been done in the last 6 years. And one of the most important scheme, that is Saubhagya scheme, which was launched by the Government of India, has resulted in making virtually access to electricity for each and every household. Second, the clean cooking, the another point which has been raised is that under the Ujjwala scheme, virtually by and large all households are having access to clean cooking services. Whether they are using it partially or totally, that is a different issue, but now access issue has been taken, and this is one of the most important thing which India has committed under the Sustainable Development Goal number 7. We committed in 2015. So on these two yardsticks, India has really done fairly well. Now, the third point which comes is that increasing the share of renewable energy in the electricity mix. If you see the stat, in the year 2014 plus, our total installed capacity was somewhere around 35 GACs. And within 6 years, it has been increased by 2.6 times. Solar energy installations has gone 14 times. If you see the basis is 2014. So now we can pretty well say that renewable energy is on the takeoff stage in the country, particularly insofar as we look at the grid connected systems are concerned. Simultaneously, renewable energy is beyond electricity. It has many connotation and manifestation. Today morning we were having a meeting on that how to reduce import dependence of the fossil fuel by renewable energy. One of the things came that apart from electricity, greening the electricity mix, there are other areas where, like in the complementing the cooking energy by the natural resources which are available within the country, as well as using process heat requirement of industry and commercial application by renewable energy sources. So all these have different kind of programs. Now these looks feel good factor and looks good in listening that we are doing well. We are very near to our 40% target of the NDC which we have set up to 2030. These are really good thing, and we are very near to that. Renewable, in the total electricity mix, the installed capacity has already reached to 38% of the total installed capacity is non-fossil fuel. But the issues are surmounting, and we are going through a phase whereby the country as a public good is not only adopting renewable energy but augmentation of many other things which are being done as a part of the renewable energy. I'll just briefly touch 3-4 major areas. Friends, renewable energy is not uniformly distributed. If you look at the solar and wind resources, wind resource is primarily focused in peninsular India. Solar in Western India, solar resources are quite good, not that good in the northeastern region or in Bihar or other places where heavy cloudy days are higher or DNI is low. So one of the major challenges which country is facing that out of this skewed distribution of renewable energy, how to create a pan-India market for the renewable energy. That is one of the most important things. That is one thing. So policy initiatives which have been taken up by Government of India, one of the major initiatives is that you can transmit renewable energy from one corner to another corner of the country without paying any transmission charges. So this policy initiative is a kind of a subsidy which is going for the renewable energy, and this is being paid by those thermal consumers which are using interstate transmission charges. So this is from the government perspective, this is a huge investment which has gone in that. You generate renewable power in those areas where the resource is good, where the potential is available, and use any corner of the country. So this has helped in creating the pan-India market for the renewable energy in the country. Second major initiative which has come recently is about creating trading renewable energy in the exchanges. Specific windows have been opened in the India Energy Exchange where you can go and trade renewable energy as a separate commodity, and this facility is now available. Good old days it was not there. It has to be traded as only electricity. That is the second measure. Third is as affirmative action, there is a reservation for renewable energy. In the Electricity Act, specific provisions have been made whereby states have been mandated to increase the share of renewable energy in a progressive manner. And if everything goes well, we expect that 21% of the energy will come from renewable sources by 2022. Recently, our Honorable Prime Minister has also declared India's aspirational goal for 2030, that is from 175 to 2022 to 450 GAILs by 2030. So this sets a different kind of context. The report International Energy Agency, which has come recently, has also made some very good feel-good predictions that by 2040 maybe solar energy will be equal to the energy generated from the coal will be that of the solar energy is generated through the solar energy. So these trends are there, but the issues which we are confronting in the country insofar as renewable are concerned, there are 6 major areas which are under address. Number one is the grid integration, because the renewable energy is informed, it is not available all the time as it is. So now its integration with the grid at the time when it is already in the peak, it may not be available. So that is one of the major focus, is that how to integrate renewable energy better in the grid. Particularly, number of measures are being taken. Creating the green energy corridor is one of them. Setting up renewable energy management centers. And apart from that, the new policy revisions which are proposed are that why not we create some time of the day tariff so that we incentivize using utilization of renewable energy in off-peak hours. So these are some of the major initiatives which have been taken in this way. Another area of action is the firm and dispatchable renewable power. As you know, infirmity is there. You have to keep something on the spinning reserve. So in order to minimize that, and with the advent of cheaper storage solutions, progressively we are finding that the storage is becoming cheaper and cheaper. So in the light of that, recent bids which have come from the Solar Energy Corporation of India, they also indicate toward that side that we are looking for that on how to integrate storage systems so that over the period we can reach 24/7 renewable power with the mix of different renewable energies and support of the storage capacity. That is one of the more important things. Mr. Rajnath also mentioned in his presentation about this research and development focus. Yes, it's not necessarily only having the technology. The way technologies are changing, it is really something very difficult to comprehend with. And specifically, I would like to mention that up to the year 2010, India was net exporter of solar energy cells and modules. We have full capacity for manufacturing of the modules also, cells also, and wafers also. But the way our demand increased and technologies, other part of the world increased, so they become uncompetitive to a larger extent. So our import for solar cells and module kept on increasing. So recently, under Atmanirbhar Bharat, a new initiative has been launched. Under this is the production link initiative, whereby 10,000 megawatt capacity for solar will be manufacturing will be just incentivized within the country under this PLI scheme. So innovation linked with the incentive for domestic manufacturing are important areas where India is focusing on. And apart from that, the new areas which are being looked are one of the things, hydrogen energy, which has been peripherally mentioned, that on 26th November, government Honorable Prime Minister has declared launching of the National Hydrogen Energy Mission. My Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, has been working to develop a draft National Hydrogen Mission. It has gone initial consultation process. Fortunately, it has also been reflected in the budget of Government of India recently. So this is at very fast rate work is going on this, and we do expect that within 1 or 2 months we will be in a position to have an amicable draft which addresses everybody's concern and addresses the concern of each and every sector, whether it is the storage capacities, how hydrogen will be used, or for automotive purposes, or for hard to abate sectors like industries like steel, ammonia, this fertilizer, or other sectors, also petrochemicals and other sectors also. So the aim under the mission which Government of India is planning at is that to initially focus on some niche applications through demonstration projects, thereafter create an innovation system for hydrogen. Many of the technologies have already been developed within the country. India is implementing a hydrogen R&D program since last 15 years or so. And every year we spend around 20 to 25 crore rupees in this research in hydrogen energy. So this is something which we are feeling that by the year 2030, when all projections, whether IEA or whether from the other think tanks, they say that for some applications it may be competitive by 25-26, but most of the applications it will be competitive by 2030. So our all efforts are aimed at to prepare the country not only in terms of the technologies, but in terms of infrastructure and end-use applications to have mainstreaming hydrogen energy when technologies are ready for that. So I will stop here. Broadly, these are the areas which I thought that are important. Another point which can be mentioned about the diversification of renewable for rural areas. One of the recent scheme which has been launched for the digitalization, where diesel reduction for the irrigation purposes, named Kusum, whereby we are aiming 2 million solar pumps for meeting the irrigation requirement in the rural areas, as well as improving the returns to the farmers also. So that way, in nutshell, we are privy to the issues which are challenges which are before us, but at the same time the contours and the signals are quite clear. India is set to have increase the share of renewables in a big way. From very modest target of 20 GAX in 2010 for solar, which we had launched, we increased it to 175 in the year 2015, and by 2022, and recently it has gone to 24,500 megawatt by 2030. And incidentally, to mention that our total installed capacity in the country as of now is only 374 GAX, and we propose to add 450 GAX only from renewable energy by 2030. This speaks in itself. Thank you very much at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maithani. I think very, very nice and optimistic sharing of thoughts. Clearly, the government is doing a lot, and it's visible in the last few years. If we're able to make all the plans happen, we can really go very far. Thank you for sharing. May I request Jarand, if you can take the stage now? We have 12 minutes to go in our session. So please take the time, and I'll summarize the last few.
I think Jarand has exited by mistake.
Okay.
Hi, do you see my screen?
We can hear you now. Yes.
We can't see the screen yet.
Sorry. Yeah.
No problem. Take a minute.
Okay. Maybe you can see it now. Maybe it's a little bit from Europe. Okay, again, thank you all for inviting me. It's very exciting for me to have this conversation. And I think actually India is the most important country in the world in terms of climate emissions and in terms of understanding how the energy landscape is developing. Because India is the single country in the world that will see the biggest increase in energy consumption to 2050. So how you do it, actually the whole world will depend on it. And that's why I also think it's very important to focus on India and to understand India. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk to you about how we regard it. So very briefly, Rystad Energy, we are 300 people analyzing the global energy markets. And we're trying to do that on a very granular level, asset by asset. And we are trying to make also a very holistic view on this. So what you see now is how we regard the global energy system. And since renewables is coming in big time, it will substitute a lot of the other energy sources. And then we have to understand how the substitution is happening on the end user side and on the power generation side. And that's why it's very important to have a very holistic view on this. So that's why I'm showing you this quite complicated chart. But what you see is on the left-hand side is all the primary energy in the world. And that is about 600 exajoule of energy. And that primary energy is either converted to useful molecules, which is then the second column, or useful electrons, basically electrons, which is the third column. And this is stored and transferred to the end users on the right-hand side. And basically, the end users are all only using about 200 exajoule. So 2/3 of this is actually losses. And it's a big emissions associated with these losses. So in one way, it's a big waste in the current global energy system. And what is, and of course, these emissions is a threat to the global climate. And that's why we have to do something with it. And that's why UN has put up this ambition of zero emission by 2050 to stop the global warming from increasing more than 1.5 degrees. And just to jump to the conclusion, I think this is possible. And I think it's a big drive to make this happen. And the drive is not only the climate emissions and the worry for a warmer climate. It's simply because these new technologies, both on the generation side and on the consumption side, is basically better technologies that will replace the existing technologies, regardless of, as I said, even the climate ambitions. So I will take you through a few reflections on this with some special, since this is kind of oil and gas associated audience, with some special implications for the fossil fuel sectors. So as you see on the left-hand side here, solar and wind is the new shock that is coming into the system. But there's been three issues with renewables. It's been too high cost, too much the problems with intermittency, and the space requirements could be in conflict with other things. So let's see how this is developing. But if you're looking at the cost part, yes, it's true. Historically, it's been too expensive. It needed subsidies. But if you look at the recent 2 years development or even the last year's development and look at the negotiated purchasing agreements in the auctions, we see that solar and wind, and you see this now project by project, has actually come down to a very, very competitive level. You know, retail prices globally in Europe, for example, is typically around $100 per megawatt hour. Industry prices is typically around $40 per megawatt hours. And already now we see that the solar and wind projects that will be put in place over the next 2 years, many of these are below even the industry for wholesale prices. So it is very competitive. And the question is, how fast can it then grow? What will be the limitations? Why shouldn't the solar kind of grow extremely fast, like hundreds of gigawatts per year? Yeah, well, it will be value chain and supply chain limitations. So in order to understand that, we're actually looking at each of the solar PV manufacturers and the capacity expansion plans that they have. So the top 4, all Chinese, you see here, Jinko, JR, Trina, and Longi. And some of these two, JR and Trina, is communicating their expansion plans also. And just to jump to one conclusion here, to make a long story short, if everybody, all the players have the similar expansion capacities, we might have a global PV capacity, production capacity of 400 gigawatt by the end of 2022. But then it takes another 2 years to install all of that. So of course that will be lagging. But using that, we can have then the most extreme growth we could think about. And that is actually that we could reach above 800 gigawatt installed every year in the 2030s, peaking at about 950 towards the end of the 2030s. And this will actually be enough to feed all the electricity that the world is needing on a sustainable basis. So we don't need more, because this will be able to replace every single power plant globally over the next 3 decades. And this is even faster than this zero emission target put up by BP. So we see a potentially extremely fast growth of solar going forward. And it will actually also be space for it. This will require about 300,000 square kilometers of space. But you can use all the hydropower reservoirs. You can use farmland where you have low productivity of the farmland, because this will yield $2.2 million every square kilometer in income, where typically farming is below 100,000. So it's 20 to 30 times more profitable to have a solar PV farm than to have a traditional farmland. So if you have other access to farm production, of course, it should be a good business case. But also you can use this offshore. So we really believe in a very quick development of solar globally. But you also need wind, and you have a lot of strong wind resources also. So just looking at, as I said, the whole energy landscape that I showed you is about 400,000 energy assets globally. And some 10,000 of these energy assets are in India. Then I include all the energy assets. Here I just show you the solar and wind assets. And it's also, you see a steep growth to more than 130 gigawatt in 2025, based on named projects only. And on top of that, we will have additional new projects that is not yet articulated. But it's lagging a little bit, as you see, from the targets that was put up in 2015. But still, I think it's a very positive trajectory. Like we also heard from the last speaker, with the politicians with very aggressive ambitions. And I think this will be very competitive resources. But of course, one question is, how will you deal with intermittency? Because the sun is shining in the middle of the day, and you need most of the energy in the mornings and in the evenings, afternoons and evenings, for cooking, etc. So then you have to deal with intermittency, and basically it's 3 main technologies that enables you to do that, and to avoid blackouts when you have no wind and no sun. That is the traditional energy technology has been pumped water, but that requires a lot of land acreage, and you don't have that really. So then you have batteries, or you have hydrogen, or you also have some grid, super grid opportunities. And I will look into these technologies and who will be the winners. But the short story is, these technologies will be able to deal with the intermittency for a cost that can be approximately the same as the cost of generation. So if the cost of generation is 20 to 30 in 5 years, also the cost of storage should be there. So then let's then look at the hydrogen. And people have since the 1970s talked about the hydrogen society, because that could be used to produce molecules from electrons, and you can use these molecules directly for fuel in the transportation sector, or in the industrial sector to produce, for example, metals, ammonia, etc. But you can also produce electricity back from this hydrogen. But then it has to be competitive, for example, with batteries. And to make a long story short, I will not take all the numbers now in the interest of time. You have to get down to $1 per kilo. And the best what you have today is 2.5. And most of these electrolyzers today, like the one you see the picture of here, has a cost that is more $5, $6, $7 per kilo. And you also have a 60% losses if you are going from electrons to hydrogen and then back to electrons. So it's not really a very strong competitor, and the scale is not very big yet. So looking then at the alternative technology, it's batteries, but just I think we have been waiting for some breakthroughs of the hydrogen that has not yet happened. We haven't seen really, for example, reversible metal hydrides, meaning that you can store hydrogen atoms directly in metal blocks. There's been some promising prospects for that 10, 20, and 30 years ago, but still it's too costly, too heavy, and too high release temperature. So as I said, the alternative is actually that the battery development will go faster than the electrolyzer and the hydrogen development. And then we rather get the battery society. And then we need to see battery costs down to below $50 per kilowatt hour. And if you then have, for example, 1,000 cycles, it will be $50 per megawatt hour delivered energy, which is close to the generation I talked about. And you only need that for part of the electrons you are sharing every day. So then it will actually could be very, very competitive with the combination of renewable and batteries, could be competing with coal and natural gas for power generation if you reach these levels. And where are we today? Well, we see that driven by the scale in the EV segment, the electric vehicle segment, we see that battery factories are in a very fast pace popping up now. Just from Norway, since I'm sitting in Norway, we have 3 mega projects of battery factories just being launched over the last 3 months, producing up to 40 gigawatt hours for each of these initiatives per year. And looking at Tesla's ambitions launched this fall, they see a growth to 3 terawatt hours, 3,000 gigawatt hours by 2030 and 10 by 2050. And then you can actually take over all energy storage by batteries. But then you need to see a reduced cost of the batteries. And they have, without going into the details, some very concrete proposals for how that could happen to make a step change also in the battery cost. So I think that battery will be might be the winning technology going forward. And that the other technologies like CCS and hydrogen will more be niche applications. And we see that even in grid storage, we have seen from Hornsdale in Australia, one example, that actually this single battery plant has been able to take 96% of the frequency and also the peaking market, and actually outcompeted gas peakers. So as you hear, I'm quite optimistic on the battery society and the very, very quick development we see there to complement the renewable society. But also a third way to get a carbon-free society is to capture all the carbon before it reaches the atmosphere. And this we can call the carbon capture, storage and utilization society. And this will happen if the price of capturing the carbon is lower than the price of emitting it. And currently it's far too low. Many countries doesn't have a carbon tax at all. And in Europe, it's been $40, $50, $60. But now recently, for example, also in Norway, it actually increased to $240 by 2030. And this is a price that is higher than the current price of carbon capture. That is still very high, 200. But I think globally, I think we need to see these technologies come down to like $50 to see that to kind of save fossil fuel in the power generation and to be competitive with renewables. And I think it's not likely at all that this will happen. So I think that carbon capture and storage will be in the industry sector, where the carbon dioxide molecule is a part of the chemical process to produce, for example, metals or fertilizers or other commodities that we need. And in that sense, we need actually still a gigantic carbon capture industry, because only to capture 5 gigaton, which is just a fraction of all what is emitted, that is more than the entire oil industry today. So actually the oil industry can return, rather than taking up oil from the ground and feeding it to the society. It could take as much in mass from the society and feeding it into the ground. And only the oil industry can do that. So still this could be a massive industry going forward. And just looking at this, how much can be emitted, and this is actually all the carbon emissions globally. And as I said, power generation, which is half of this, we see for India is even more than half of it. India is emitting about 2.5 gigaton of carbon dioxide every year. China, even much more. And what can be replaced by renewables is the power generation, and actually also the power consumption in the industry, which is this other. But the industry processes cannot be replaced by renewables, maybe by hydrogen. But this is the area where we can actually study that will be a lasting market for carbon capture technologies. And just looking at India, we have looked here at all the factories, all the plants in India that is producing cement. They're emitting about 140 megaton. And this is a lasting long-term market if we're able to capture this alternatively to the emission that we see today. And then back to oil. So what does this mean for the oil market? Well, we are currently producing 100 million barrels per day, at least before the corona. And of this, 20% is going to the industry, 66% to the transportation sector, and 5% to the building sector. And then you have about 6% to power generation, and some is then lost during the storage. So looking at the carbon sector, the transportation sector, how fast can that be decarbonized? As I said, 66 million barrels per day is from oil, about 2 million from gas, and about 3.3 million from electricity today, which is primarily subways and train based on electricity. And we have been analyzing this, and of course, how EVs will develop. And basically, to put a long story short again, an EV is simply a better machine. It's much less moving parts. It's much lower maintenance cost. It's actually higher performance in terms of driving performance with faster acceleration. And as I said, much less maintenance and even better balance in the machines. So obviously this will win. And what we have seen over the last few weeks only is very aggressive communication. Even last week, we saw that Nissan published that they will be all electric fleet by 2035. They will not produce any internal combustion engine cars from 15 years from now. General Motors, surprisingly, the American producer, had the same ambition with brands like Cadillac and others, They will produce only electric vehicles from 2035. Volvo has already published that they will be all electric by 2030. So even before. So it's almost like a race between car manufacturers to publish now that they're going to be all electric. So because it's a big cost to maintain an ICE production line and to do ICE R&D. If you know that's a dying segment, why should you invest in it? It's better to immediately transfer. So I think we will see a race going forward also from all the other car manufacturers to announce that they will go all electric. So what will then be the consequences for the car sales? And I'm showing you, 3 different scenarios as you see. So this is what was previously communicated by governments in terms of their ambitions from taking down or introducing EVs in the fleet. If you look at the car manufacturers, as they communicated until this last wave, they had, for example, an ambition to be 22% EVs by 2025. And then as a result of that, on the right-hand side, you see this black line. Then, for example, this will mean 25 million barrels per day in demand in 2033, I mean, down to 10 million in 2047. But if you take this most
I'm
aggressive,
sorry to intervene.
yeah.
Hello all, I'm sorry to intervene, but I request you all to kindly expedite, please, because we are shooting ahead of time.
Okay, so I think I just wanted to round off there then that we will see this dramatic drop of the oil consumption, which is going, of course, to take the emissions to the level we want, but will create big challenges for oil and gas companies going forward. But still, there's a lot of opportunities in this. So, okay, then I think time is up, and yeah, I don't know if there's room for questions or what.
Thank you, Jarand. We will keep time for questions for a couple of minutes. But just before that, allow me a minute to conclude. So I think we heard Maithani ji speak about that our per capita usage of energy is almost 1/3 of the global average. And yet Jarand sees that India will be the largest consumer of increase in energy consumption by 2050. I think in that context, we need to keep in mind the trilemma that Seethapathy ji talked about on how to go about it, and how Rajnath ji spoke about decarbonization, not just even at MSME level, but also for transportation. I think my only concluding thought in synthesizing all of this is that given what all the speakers have spoken about, we're talking about at least $200 to $300 billion of investments. If I put all of that together, the advantage India has, as I see through my years of aging, is that we switched over from landline to mobile very quickly because we had not invested much in the pager capital investment. Versus the Western markets, I see that as the equivalent opportunity in energy transition for India. If the $300 billion of investment for India can go more towards renewables versus continued investments in traditional fossil fuels, I think that's where the difference will come on how much we make this energy transition a reality versus conversations. Let me take a pause there for any questions which the audience may have. Otherwise, we'll look to conclude the session. Any questions from the audience?
I think we can move ahead, sir.
Sure. Thank you, speakers from all over the world and India. Is very, very insightful, even for me, having advising various clients and various forums, to hear and learn from you. Thank you for taking time out, each of you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rakesh ji, for leading the conversation.
Thank you. Very insightful and all excellent presentation.